Hello and welcome to Red's Business and Technology Podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Barnes.
And I'm your co-host, Brad Ferris.
And today we're sitting down with Peter Laurie, who's had decades of experience running successful startups, advising the startup community in Brisbane with a background in software development. Peter, thanks for coming in. Really appreciate your time. Mate, do you want to start with your background and how you got here?
Thanks for having me in there. It's good having in here. It's good to be in here. So my background started out electrical engineering, but never worked as an electrical engineer because this thing called the internet turned up. And I burned my fingers a lot less on the internet. So I've been doing software development since I was a little tacker because Dad put together a computer in 1979. So I'm at the front of that generation that's always had a computer in the house. So when it came through engineering, just a natural progression from from high school into university, and then doing software development because at the time you could come out of engineering with doing 6 or 7 software development projects, software development subjects. But you could do IT at the time and come out with one, and that was in Gardens Point Modular, right? So as an engineer, we had a lot more software development stuff that we were doing. So I jumped into that because that was a really good place for me. And for me, it's a really creative tool. So you sit down, you can work with it. So I worked in various businesses going through, and then in 2001, one of the businesses I was working in went to absolute crap, but we nailed it technically. So for the people with a software development background, we were doing continuous integration loops. We were doing test-driven development. It was called extreme programming back then, not agile.
Extreme programming.
Extreme programming. We were running a team of about 8 or 9 people, and we were delivering every 2 weeks and then adjusting to what went on, but it still went to crap. So I went and did an MBA to work out what went wrong with that. Turns out we didn't invoice often enough. That wasn't the reason it went to crap, but it was.
That took an MBA.
If we, yeah, that's right. So 2 weeks in, I've worked out what I needed to learn. That's the truth.
Daily speech in here. Yeah. Nothing's changed.
It's just because, yeah, it is. And well, the invoicing every 2 weeks doesn't solve it, but it means you've only got 2 weeks worth of work in the air, right? Yeah. So you get paid for that. So we nailed that technically though, and then did the MBA to work out what went wrong. So about 2 weeks in, I worked out what we did wrong, but then was sitting there to learn. So I came out of that with strategy and entrepreneurship and microeconomics, which fits my megalomania quite well. And then we jumped in and started the business. So me and a mate of mine and then my brother came along and joined us, started the business in developing software for businesses. So, and because of our experience, we knew we were talking about it as venture capability. So we knew we could build what they wanted. The problem is that the people that we were working with didn't really have as good an idea as we thought they did, because we thought our ideas were crap, so someone else out of industry would have a much better idea. So we did about 8 or 9 of those sorts of new ventures with them, and it went to crap. And then in 2000, this is a long answer to the question.
No, you're right.
Then in 2011, end of 2011, down at the Waterloo Hotel, we were talking to Steve Baxter, who's a friend of the family as well. And he said, I'm starting a co-working space up here. I said, shut up and take my money because that's going to bring the people that I need to work with. And so instead of us going out and finding them, we should be able to find them there. Then there's this really weird situation there where I've got this deep technical background and then this formal training and how the business is supposed to work. And then there's all these people that weren't really executing well, so I've got to go in and help, right? And there's a real moral hazard that turns up. So I'm taking them through their business and how they should be attacking it, and then saying, so what you really need is an organisation that can do the software development in this mechanism and all this way, and oh, by the way, we do that. So there's a real moral hazard there. So you're sort of coaching people to need you. So it's almost grooming, right? And so then that never worked really well because I'd be doing the coaching for free basically and then charging a proper amount for the software development. And that most people couldn't handle that. So started doing more stuff commercially, so back into that stuff. So a lot of work with Oracle, which led to Virgin, Energex, Telstra, those sorts of places, NAB, Suncorp. So doing that sort of work and then doing a whole bunch of work in the startup ecosystem just purely as a mentor or what they call an EIR, so an entrepreneur in residence is normally the role that I'm playing. So so I've been applying the stuff that I've learned over the last 30 odd years, which makes me sound really old because I am, and into the new venture space. So that's where I spend the majority of my time. A lot of stuff here in Queensland, a lot of stuff in Melbourne as well. So Victoria.
So that is really you're advising startups on what technology they need and then what development they need and then how to go and do it. You're not doing any of the developing anymore. You're more strategic advisor.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I spend the majority of my time denying that technical background.
Okay.
Because you get put in this bucket, right? Oh, will you fix my website for me? It's like, no, I won't, right? But I'll tell you why you don't need your bloody website and how you should work properly. So I try and stay away from a lot of the tech, which is confusing for a lot of people. So I'm like a business nerd. So business models, all that sort of stuff about how to execute and working in uncertainty, which is the stuff we might talk about a bit later. But in spaces where nobody knows what you're going to do, right? So if nobody knows what we have to do, we've got to work it out for ourselves. So how do we go about working it out for ourselves? So we go through that sort of thing. And then part of solving that in the current environment is obviously technically based. So where those sorts of advisors would normally stop there and say, now go and find someone to do it for you, I can run through the whole gamut with them as well. So it's actually a very big part of what I do, but it's not where I start because most things aren't a technical problem. They're a business problem first.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the startups that you're dealing with or the businesses that you're working with, they're not necessarily tech startups. They could be any business doing anything.
Yep.
And again, it's like, okay, well, here's a problem we're trying to solve. Here's our mission. Here's what we're trying to do.
Yep.
You will first look at that business problem, and if there's a technology function or technology solution that can work for that business, that's when you'll get the tools out. So
exactly. The bit that I'd add to it is that the vast majority of them, the solution or the cutting edge part of it actually uses technology.
Yep.
So it very quickly becomes part of it.
Yep.
But it's certainly starting with the business first and working the way through that. Because like I said before, every technical problem that you run into is a business problem first.
Yep.
Right. So I can solve it, but how did we get here and why am I solving this thing? So I spend a lot of time either working with tech teams to teach them what they should be solving rather than what they're optimizing around, which is normally how do we do as many story points a week as we can, or how do we make sure our backlog's as short as it is. And then teaching them that there's these other things they need to do and they can actually do all the cool things they want if they can justify it in a business terminology. And then from the business side, I'm sort of taking them through, well, business is a bit tricky, taking from the business side through, hey, if you ask them for the right things, they can probably build it. And then there's the whole product aspect where I've been spending a bunch of time at the moment as well around sort of product versus tech versus the business.
Do you come across many founders in your work experience that have a level of commercial acumen or that business experience, or is
it depends. They all come from different places.
Yep.
So there definitely are tech founder ones that come through, and they're actually great because they already know the really complicated stuff, and I can teach them business.
Yep.
Right. The business isn't that complicated.
Yeah.
Right. You can't. The people that come in from business and say, "I want to do this tech," I can't teach them how to program. I can't teach them how to do that stuff. That's well, I can, but it's a lot harder for them to do.
Yep.
Right. Especially because I have that tech background, I know how to get them through from a tech person across this. And the same thing from a product point of view. So from a product point of view, understanding what people actually want is lovely, but it needs to be tempered by what we can actually build and what they'll actually pay for. And so we're all coming from different spots, and it's about getting them into the middle and working out how to play. So a lot of the stuff that I end up doing is actually sneaky teaching them how to be a high-performing team. Right, and getting them to communicate properly and realise that some of the time people don't know the answer. So holding your breath until you get lied to, so you've got something to work off so you can efficiently deliver the wrong thing, is the way it sort of degrades most of the time.
Looking forward to getting some valuable insights out of you from your experience of just that business mentor side with that tech background is really interesting, actually. So let's set the landscape for the audience listening. What are some of the current kind of projects and roles that you're doing now before we jump and ask you a bunch of questions?
Okay, so I'm doing at River City Labs, which is what's been around we talked about before, for about 12, 13 years now. So I'm in a role called the Mentor in Residence, which is basically I stick my nose into other people's stuff until they unify against me with pitchforks and torches and chase me away.
Cool.
Right, but the important thing is they do it as a team.
So what does that look like at River City Labs? Obviously, I've heard about it, but I don't know the specifics. So
it's a co-working space.
So you pay, if I'm a guy, I want to rock up, I want to rent a desk kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay.
So, there's a digital membership that's coming. I'm not sure if it's been deployed yet because obviously co-working space is a tough business model at the best of times. In a global pandemic, it gets tougher. So finding a way to actually provide that community and collaboration, right, is important because the entrepreneurship journey, as I'm sure you remember, right, is a lonely thing to start with, and ups and downs. And so having that community together is really important. So it's a membership-based thing. It's actually run by ACS at the moment, so the Australian Computer Society. So they bought River City Labs from Steve, I think it was about 2017.
Yep.
But it's a membership, and then as part of that membership, you actually get access to be able to book me.
Okay.
So just before this, I was doing a 45-minute call, 50-minute call with a team.
And then mentors in residence, is there like a few of you there?
The mentor in residence thing is because there's a lot of mentors that are involved, but I was there every day.
Okay.
And then I'd have someone who'd been there like once last year turn up and try and get treated the same as I did. It's we're going to have to change this. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it anymore. Just personal motivation stuff.
Yep.
So I just sort of bumped it up a bit rather than taking away their title, bumped my title up. But there's a whole bunch of mentors there that have the specialisation in their particular fields.
Right. Yep.
So my specialisation is probably being around for the last 12 years, having seen thousands of startups come through and knowing what their problems are.
Is it that number? Thousands?
Yeah, it's a bit weird. So I feel stupid when I say it. I'm getting better at saying it. But look, it's 12 years, 100 a year, which is 2 a week. Yeah. I definitely do 2 a week. Right?
And, of those, of thousands, success stories?
Oh, yeah, there's a few. There's percentage. Percentage is an interesting one. It depends where you draw from. So it's the people that have an idea.
Still with us today.
Yeah. But it's about the number that you start with, right?
Yeah.
Is it people that turn up and have an idea, or is it people that had got something and decided they were going to do it full time and took it through?
Right. Yeah.
And part of the brief of an accelerator program is to take those people that decided to do it full time, that this is what they're going to do with their life, for at least for the next 7 years or something like that, and take them through and actually help them get there. So from an accelerator program point of view, I think it's much higher than that.
What, like?
I reckon it's about 60%, 60-70%.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I expected much lower, to be honest.
And then so that's the semi-established, if you like, coming in, and then the others just, mate, I got an idea, I'm having a crack.
Yeah, I got a great idea. Find someone to build it for me. Yeah,
and that's it.
Look, it's harsh. It's very hard to be general with it.
Okay.
There's people that come in that are undeniable. They're definitely going to do it. Right? It doesn't really matter what they do, they're going to find a way through it.
Yep.
There's people that come in that definitely can, and it's about making sure they see that.
Yep.
And then we give them the tools to be able to do it and the confidence to be able to do it and explain it to them, which is sort of where I spend a lot of my time, just saying, no, you've got everything you need, just go and do it. Right? It's not quite that simple, but demonstrating to them they've got everything they need. And then there's some people that this starts to get a bit harsh, but there's some people that are there just because it's startups are cool.
Right.
And I get to turn up at 10 o'clock in the morning and I get to wear T-shirts and I really like bad pizza and bad beer. So this is my place.
Crazy. Well, what was it talk about in the show? But I mean, geez, the amount of patience and EQ that would be required, because you'd be dealing with all different kinds of personality types.
Yeah. But it's also that there's people there that actually have something that's genuinely their passion.
Yeah.
And so the way that I fell into a lot of this stuff is basically how much of I normally say, how much of an arsehole do I have to be to withhold helping them? Right, I can help them, right? So I'm going to jump in and help them, right? So which, again, was the whole thing we talked about earlier about the moral hazard.
Yeah.
Right? So I need to earn some money somewhere because food's nice, right? And it's nice to have a place to hide at night. So it's about balancing that sort of stuff. But there are people that are undeniably should be in there. And there's a couple of things that I was involved in, like one called Startup Catalyst, which we took 18 to 29-year-olds across the San Francisco Silicon Valley, blew their minds and bring them back. The idea was to actually build more CTOs locally.
Right.
So we picked over technical skill set, so not necessarily software development or network or engineering or security. So machine learning stuff, a bit of robotics, even UI, UX, which is a very technical skill when you get deep into it. And you bring them all over there, and we selected on that, and then we also selected on their leadership capabilities because we could only take so many over. So we wanted to come back and lead and bring other people through, and that's one of the most important things I've done in the ecosystem there.
How many people did you take over?
We'd taken on the youth mission, it was 20 at a time, but we did 4, so we did 80.
Cool.
I could probably tell you where about 50 of them are now. What they're doing. It's a real slow burn that'll have a big impact, but it's hard to maintain.
So 50 successful startup entrepreneurs.
Well, it depends how you measure success, right? So There's a couple that went over and did this thing, and they worked out that it's not for them.
Yep.
Right, and that's successful as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
And then we also put them on not a pedestal, but we put them on panels and stuff, and say talk about why it's not right for you. Right, because what we want is more people actually participating in this. Because one of the things that we've got locally is we've got an unending stream of talent coming out of our universities. It just keeps coming and coming and coming. So after we did the first intake for Startup Catalyst, I thought, right, we've caught up with everybody, and now we're going to get 4 or 5 a year.
Sorry, what's Startup Catalyst?
That's the mission that we took over.
Okay.
And then the next year it was better, and the year after that it was better again. And I think that year and the year after that one, we actually went national. So it was just ridiculous. So we've got these where we've got this talent coming out of our universities, and we don't really have the roles or the things to do.
So how does that work? So they come out of uni.
Yep.
This is through River City.
This is through River City. Well, yeah, through.
So I assume River City has a connection with the universities.
Well, it was where we ended up was getting university students because they were easy to access from a market perspective, because we could go through the universities and advertise to them.
Yep.
But we didn't really constrain it to university stuff.
Right. And then they'll come out to the age group that you would take over is generally around that age.
Yeah, 18 to 29 is where we ended up.
Okay.
Yeah. So we started with 18 to 25, but that wasn't quite right. And then we started to go to 21, 29 just because sometimes it's a disservice to take someone over too early because they haven't really worked out who they are yet.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So, but there was one guy that we took over, and we're doing the interview, and it's like, yeah, you're great, but we're not taking 18-year-olds. So justify it, right? So that was in the interview, harsh question, and he just did. It's like, fair enough. Wow. Come along, right?
Awesome.
And they're all, so like we're just talking about the success part of it. There's ones that have gone through and done founding really good big businesses. There's a couple that have taken a shot and haven't quite worked, and now they're doing really well. And then there's people that are still turning their career around, right? So you come out on some sort of trajectory this way, and you're shown the bright, shiny place, the land of milk and honey over here where you'd love to be, and you got to turn the ship and get there.
So I want to circle back to the startup community in South East Queensland. But before we do, apart from River City Labs, what else are you working on now? Oh yeah,
so I do stuff. I was the EIR at UQ in 2018, so I did 2 intakes there. I'm currently lecturing at UQ. In
EIR is?
Entrepreneur in Residence.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, sorry. It's terminology. It's not to exclude you guys. It's just so you don't have to say entrepreneur in residence every time. So so lecturing in the MBA capstone at UQ in entrepreneurship there with Cam Turner. So there's stuff down at Monash that'll be coming back as well. So it's sort of in their student stuff and maybe a little bit of research at Innovator. I'm also doing a little bit of investing directly myself at the really small scale. But it's sort of finding that talent that we were talking about before and saying, please don't drive Ubers, please concentrate on your business. There's some money. And then a little bit with River City Labs. I'm sort of scattered in a lot of different places, basically.
No week's the same by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Well, it feels that way sometimes, and it feels exactly the same every week sometimes as well.
Are you directly involved in any of these like businesses as a board member or a strategic advisor? A
lot of strategic advisor stuff, but it's interesting because there's ones that I work with that I've been working since they were 2 people.
Right
now they're 60. There's another one that might be even more than that. So I kind of I walk in, I know everything that's going on, I can help it, but I don't really have a formal relationship there.
Yep.
So some of them I'm an investor in them, but really early stage investment stuff.
Yep.
So in your words, Peter, what is the current state of the startup community in South East Queensland?
I think it's strong. I think it's there's a bit of an ebb and flow going on. So up until about 2017-16, there was a lot of activity there. The state government was throwing a lot of money in that sort of direction, and to everybody's surprise, including theirs, a lot of it stuck. So there's a lot of good programs that came through and made things happen. Since then, COVID didn't help, but it wasn't really the cause of it. I think we just lost a bit of steam there, and people basically tapped out a bit. We put a lot of effort in for 5 or 6 years, and now, or maybe a little bit longer, and now it's time for someone else to come through.
So how do you define a startup? Maybe how did the state government define a startup?
It's a point of contention, right? So especially when you put it inside entrepreneurship. So you can argue that the hairdresser and the butcher are entrepreneurship. They're starting a new thing. So what we normally talk about with the startup is the fast growth and high potential.
Yep.
So you're normally looking to make it happen in 18 months or something like that. So really get through and do it. And if you're onto something, you can make it happen that quick. And then it's also not just going to stop at a geographic region. It's going to just keep going.
Yeah, right, okay.
And if part of the mission for the Startup Catalyst stuff was to illustrate to them that the people in San Francisco, which is where we went, there's no real difference in how they work. There's no real, the sky is still blue, people are people, laptops work the same way. What it is, it's an intent. It's a way of doing. So getting them to create their own futures, which fits back with the education, because we teach them everything they need, and then they end up doing something that's just not sufficient. They look like they're overtrained, right? So instead of saying, oh, we're overtraining them, let's teach them less, it's like, no, we'll keep teaching the same stuff and give them the ability to build something, give them the ability to work on it. So the state, it was so the chief entrepreneur was the sort of thing that came through with Mark Sowerby. So he was the first one, and then Steve Baxter was the second one, and they really opened up the space a bit. I like to think of the role as preferred agitator.
So when you say the heat came out of it around COVID,
yeah, it's because a lot of it was around events and getting everybody together. So right. and that dropped away a bit.
So that when you say it dropped off a bit, like the amount of startups coming through, or the amount of startups kind of coming through?
The amount of activity, right? Yep. So I'd say that part of what comes through is a reaction to the activity. There's people that were going to do it anyway.
Yep.
And there's still, to be honest with you, there's still a lot of people outside of it that I'd consider part of the startup ecosystem, but they don't consider themselves part of it because they don't. They look at it and think that I'm not 19 years old and I don't skate to work, right? So it's an interesting sort of space there. But part of the value of me talking to you guys about this is to make sure everybody understands that, you know, anybody can come along and participate. You don't need to be 19 years old. You don't need to skate to work. And that there's a whole bunch of value there that we can help unlock. And you can probably point to the fact that I spend a lot of my time with 19-year-olds, right? But that's because it's the only people that turn up.
So how our audience and our client base is more in the established business space.
Yep.
How would they engage the startup community?
It's a good question, right? So it's really the core of this startup stuff, in my opinion, is working on a valuable hard problem. Right, and a lot of startups, especially the less successful ones, sort of come out and they're working on a hard problem, be it technical or be it social or whatever it is. They're working on that, and just because it's hard doesn't make it valuable, right? So one of the things that a lot of businesses that are in your listenership, that's the right word, that are listening,
checks out,
listening right now. Computer says yes. Sorry, ChatGPT must have got that wrong. So they've all got valuable hard problems. Right? They might even have some valuable easy problems. So the real thing is making sure that the ecosystem knows, or ecosystem sounds weird, but we'll come back to that in a sec. But make sure that people there know that they've got that problem, right? So we've got smart people who can build anything. And at the moment they're choosing things that sound like they're hard and valuable, but they're not valuable. Right?
So give me a realistic example. So let's say there's someone that owns a trucking company and they have a hard problem. Mm-hmm. They should just, where do they go and just float the problem by the startup community? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I think that a good place to engage would be at River City Labs. So to come down and just sort of speak to the community down there and say, hey, I'd love to speak to someone who can help me solve this particular problem.
So maybe practically, so literally if I just rock up, what's it going to be like, you know, kind of bunch of dudes sitting around?
Well, yeah. So when they're all working the same way you guys are working, right? It's basically there's stuff going on.
Yep.
But there's normally events that are there.
Okay,
there's certain events that are around. So I think there's a community coffee one coming soon.
Yep.
Well, perpetually there's one every week, I think, or every 2 weeks.
We should go.
Yeah, you should.
I've never actually been down there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sort of just turn up and talk to the people there. Ask about what they're doing. You know, listen to what they're doing. So have you considered doing these things, right? Or hey, listen. So you've got a tech background. Or you've got a background that's working in problems that are hard. I've got this really hard problem. Do you reckon you could solve that? Right?
And relationships just form, ideas get thrown around, sparks happen, and off you go.
Yep. Yeah. And it may well be it's not for me, mate, but you have a chat to that guy.
Yep.
Have a chat to that girl over there. She's into that sort of space. So it's a real, it benefits from participation. Like normally when I'm talking to people about it, when they come in, so I do a sort of group mentoring I do every now and again down there as well. So I get sick of doing 1 hour with everybody individually. I just say, okay, everybody, I'm about to do one, everybody in the room.
Yep.
Right. So and it turns into 2 hours, but it's the first hour and a half for everybody. So I get very time efficient for me.
Yep.
One of the things I talk about is you'll get 10 times back from what you put in. But if you put 0 in, you'll get zero out, right? And even if we made the space 100x, if you put zero in, we're still going to get zero out, right? So you got to put something in. So it's really about getting there and participating and being open and genuinely curious is what I'm normally talking to people about. So what could we do? How could we work, right? But it's really disappointing to see some teams get stuck, especially on the tech side. Oh, what we need to do is put this on Kubernetes and then it'll be perfect, right? If we build it, then they'll come, right? When that's not what people care about. And it's also not the problem that they've got right now. They don't need to be able to work out how to scale to be something the size of Netflix. They just need to work out how to get the value done.
Are there any other ways that the business established business community can engage a startup community apart from physically walking down there?
Well, I mean, okay, we'll solve it. They can reach out to me for starters, right? One of the roles that I play in the space just by accident is sort of routing people around to the right spot and speaking to the right people about it, because I'm floating between a lot of different places. I'm not only really at one. And it's interesting once you're genuinely curious about what people are doing, you understand what lights them up, and you'll run into someone else, you remember how to connect them, right? And you put them in the right spot, and then the sparks happen like you were talking about before, right? Because there's so many things that we could be working on, and there's only so many jump the queue apps and so many coffee ordering apps and those sorts of things that we can get through. But there's some really hard, valuable problems out there that we can solve, and they're actually easier than a lot of the stuff they're trying to do.
You see that like QR code on tables in restaurants and stuff.
Yeah.
Now it's a tiny problem. It wasn't really a hard problem, but geez, they probably did well.
Waiting for iPhone to actually use it. Yeah.
So you mentioned before it's kind of a membership type system.
Yep.
So you have, in the office memberships, you mentioned digital memberships.
Yep.
So if you have I'll call it a physical membership, you basically have a full-time desk.
Yeah, so you can either have a full-time desk, there's an office there, or there's hot desks as well.
And then so like at any given time, how many people are, I guess what's the capacity of the place, and then at any given time, how many physical members would there be?
At the moment, I mean, you should get Pauline in here to talk about this actually. So she runs River City Labs.
I'm kind of fascinated actually.
Yeah, and I think Laura is there as well now. So it's worth having a chat to them about that.
Okay.
So at the moment, it's not heavily patroned because everybody's worked out that they've got a spare bedroom, right? And they know how to make Zoom work now. So I've made it even harder. But I think another way to engage for an organisation is to sponsor an event or to be a business sponsor of the space.
Do you ever have businesses who just place someone there that have a hot desk and they're like, well, we'll just rotate, I don't know, like for us, we just rotate somebody working down there and have a chat to people and again see if you can build relationships, get ideas. I mean, it's kind of I guess it's the philosophical debate about working from home versus in the office. Personally, I've come more to the hybrid. I was pretty staunch on office because of that relationship building, team working, spark building. You definitely can do things remotely, but I just went to the Philippines for 2 weeks, and my relation, we've had people over there for over a year, but the change in relationship, the change in dynamic based on the personal experience we have is just 100x, not 10x. So there's definitely I believe in physically showing up. So do you see businesses just placing someone there and
what value do they get out of it? Let's put it that way.
So it's a newer way of working. So so normally you'd measure performance, or traditionally you'd measure performance by attendance, right? They're there, they look busy, therefore they're doing stuff, right? So, which, you laugh, but a lot of places you still go there.
Bums and seat mentality.
Yeah, that's right. And where are you? I was talking to a customer outside. No, you were having a smoke, right? So
a vape these days, man.
No, whatever. No. However they choose to kill themselves, it's fine, right? So it's their own thing, man.
Yeah.
But the so I think it's a bit of a change in way of doing it. So 2000 to the mid 2000s, 2010s, the teenies, I suppose you call them, there were businesses dropping, teams in there to do something different. So part of the problem when you're talking about the corporate innovation stuff is that it's very hard to do something in a different way if you're sitting next to someone who's doing something in the traditional way. So this concept of an ambidextrous organisation. So you need to be able to work a little bit differently. So getting them up and putting them somewhere else actually helps them feel different. It sort of gives them approval to move in a different way. And part of it's about seeing how fast a high-performing startup can move. So whereas it might take us 6 weeks to do a set of wireframes in corporate, it's like, no, I did it just then. Do you want me to do it again in front of you? I can just do it now, right? So that sort of exposure to how much faster it can be and different ways of working, I think is really valuable. There's some problems with it. I mean, we could talk for an hour about the corporate innovation stuff, but there are people that are doing it, but part of it, I mean, you guys have got the ping pong table here. I normally talk about the way that most businesses think about it is...
Look at the ping pong table, mate. You see the turntables and the sound system?
Yeah. I didn't want to throw you guys under the bus, but you did it yourself, right? So, because you don't know what I'm about to say. Right?
Edit this out, Brad.
Yeah, that's right. But so a lot of people will think that the innovative thinking and the innovative way of working comes from ping pong table, bean bags, bad pizza, bad beer, right? And being able to turn up at 10 o'clock and wear T-shirts, right? But where it actually comes from is the lack of, in my opinion, is the constraints that they have to work in. So they've got to do everything in 2 weeks. Why? Because they've only got 2 weeks worth of runway, right? So they've got to operate in a certain way, and that brings creativity because you've got to be creative to work in that environment. And one of the things that falls down in the larger corporates is they think that we'll put smart people in a room and we'll give them free coffee machine, right? And they can turn up whenever they want in the swipe card and we'll treat them differently. Then suddenly innovation will happen. But for me, it's really around that constraint stuff. So then seeing those startups actually operating in that constraint, they can say, well, hang on, they were being super pragmatic and it just worked barely enough to be able to work out whether it's worth doing properly, as opposed to, well, we've got to go through and show all our working and then deliver something in 18 months. So that the startup focus is I've got to deliver something in 2 weeks or in 4 weeks or in 2 days, right? So it's a different way of working. And where the value comes from that is actually that you learn a lot quicker, right? Because your feedback loop's a lot tighter, right? So, and if this is part of where I'm in the coaching part with it, if they're actually learning from that feedback, so they're not just scattering and shooting at everything, right? But if they're actually learning about how to do stuff and what they're doing and they're building up theories around how the market works or how their customers think, then they very quickly track into where they need to be. Right? So,
Peter, you've been a strategic advisor for thousands of startups now.
Yeah.
I didn't actually prep you for this question, mate. So I'm
That's
going to
right.
put you completely on the spot here. What's your favourite one of all time and why?
There'll be people that'll be upset with this, but okay, I'm going to do two, right? So,
Right. Which one first?
the first one is Floodmaps.
Okay.
Oh, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
So they found a way to do flood mapping.
It's about 10 years old.
Oh no, they'd be 4 or 5.
Okay, maybe
I think. So they came through River City Labs Accelerator with me.
Okay.
So Juliet, who's the CEO, and Ryan, who's the CTO, they found a way to do flood mapping, which is traditionally something once in 100 years sort of thing, to do it 130,000 times faster. And I thought they were making that up, and it wasn't. And it's gone from 10,000 to 50,000 to 100,000 to 130,000 times. So what that means is instead of saying, oh, it's flooding, Peter, you better, head up, right? It's the water's coming from this way. You can drive out that way and don't worry about it. You're going to be fine, but you better get to your mum's place, right? So that's sort of stuff that they can do that, depending on where the rain's coming from, whether it's coming from straight down or whether it's coming from up the river or whether it's coming from, flood from below, right? So that they do that sort of stuff there. And that's great because, flood engineering traditionally couldn't see that solution.
And they went over to the US and then I believe they supply over the US as well.
Yeah. So they've got an integration with Waze.
Yeah.
I think it's somewhere in Virginia.
Yeah. And why are they your
because
first of two favourites? Sorry.
Okay. So because they had something, they stuck to their guns. They've made it happen, and Juliet's just basically a force of nature. She made that stuff happen, right? And she's the flood engineer, so having the arguments with the people that are doing it in an inefficient way for the last 30 years. And convincing that change and navigating that stuff. It's just, they were really, really good. They're one of my favourites. And the other one that comes to mind is one called Explorate, which is does digital freight forwarding. So they so logistics and freight forwarding stuff. So I've got a container full of stuff in China. I need to get it to Australia, make it work. So they've navigated their way through, no pun intended, to be able to come through a particular business model and then change to a different one, and found the right spot to do it. And now they've found it. They're 65 people right now.
So they're your second favourite.
Yeah,
because
just to annoy Connor, yeah.
Because that how they were able to pivot and then found a kind of good spot and then grown and done that really successfully.
They're both ones that I've spent a lot of time with. So I've been really involved in those ones. And then there's other ones in the startup ecosystem like Volt Performance that they do a whole bunch of sports performance testing. They're based down opposite the Burnabaraban Hotel, so down near Bunnings, down at Newstead, sort of area. Yeah, big orange building. They're great. Go One's done incredible things.
Yep.
There's another one, Octopus Deploy, that came out of nowhere actually.
Oh, you were an advisor for?
No, I wasn't. I barely knew anything about them. Right? I'd heard of them. Yep. And then all of a sudden it's a $175 million investment out of the US.
A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So from your years of experience from a software developer and then advising startups as well, in your words, if you could put it down to like a paragraph or a short sentence, how do you run a successful startup?
So it really, the biggest problem is that most people that jump into this startup, it's a big difference. It's a big change, right? I'm probably in a decent job, or I've got this opportunity, this burning desire to do this thing, and I've got a solution in my head, right? So I'll jump in, and the whole idea is to build that solution as quickly as I can, sort of the field of dreams sort of play. If I build it, they'll come, right? And what the problem with that is that you're very likely wrong with that idea. Not because you're bad, not because you're stupid, not because you haven't got experience, not because you don't have insight. It's just because you're probably solving your problem, not everybody's problem. Okay? So the big thing to do is to actually get that really tight feedback loop that we were talking about before, be able to get that feedback and work out whether you are right or not. But instead of working out how to very quickly build the thing, which may be wrong, you're actually working out how to very quickly work out what the right thing to build is and then build that.
So kind of rapid prototyping, rapid market feedback.
Yeah. And it's sort of, I normally draw a lot of this when I'm presenting, so it's like being at the whiteboard, right?
Yep.
So it's really about finding the three big things, which is what do they actually want, right? And then what can you build? And then also what will they pay for?
Yep.
Right. And the nice thing about tech is that what you can build is generally getting bigger and bigger. I mean, the AI stuff now is basically magic, right? And we're almost giving that away, or we're giving it away by the second, or charging by the second for it, or by the word for it. The big puzzle is then you've got to work out what people actually want and then what actually people will pay for. You're looking for the intersection between those three things. So most people would normally then say, well, it's easy. You got to talk to customers, right? Well, there's a problem there, and that the customers lie. They don't so much lie as they don't know what they want. They don't know what they need. They've got no idea what you can do. And even if they did, they don't have the vocab to express it. So you need to be building things in front of them to show them, if I build this thing properly, this is a long paragraph, to build this thing properly, right, would they pay for it? Right? And then you're working out whether you can build it properly. And then you're trying to get in front of them and trying to get them to pay for it early. Right? So the pilots and proof of concepts and those sorts of things. And then you're actually very efficiently finding the right thing and building it at the same time, which, isn't the way that software development works normally. It's not the way the software development works in corporate. It's actually the business case for Agile, right? Because we don't do Agile, which comes to the software development stuff you sort of previewed before. A lot of people will do Agile because it's from the book of Agile and we have to do it. And the hymn book says that we have to do it this way. And if we don't do it this way, then as a dev, I'm going somewhere else that does it properly, right? But the problem is that you don't really know what you need to build. So instead of very quickly building the wrong thing in a perfect way that'll scale to infinity, right? It's much better to build a 3 out of 10 and deliver that and put that in front of the customer and see if that's the right thing. If we built this as a 5 out of 10, would you start paying for it, right? Which is a discipline that's very different than build perfect software, which is normally turn all the dials up to 11 and then deliver what you've got at the time you said you were going to deliver it, right? Which is normally 4 out of 10 or something like that, right? It's a really weird way of operating, but it's like I said, it's the business case of Agile. So which a lot of people forget that was what it was for. So basically, a lot of what happens in the IT organisations is they like to optimise around those tickets. If you give me perfect requirements, I will give you software on time, exactly what you ask for. What they don't realise is that the product person who's defining this thing does not know what the right answer is. So they tend to complain, and the IT organisation basically holds their breath until they get perfect requirements. And the business basically says, fine, there's your perfect requirements. So they're asking to be lied to. And they partially deliver on the lie and then get upset that it was a lie. It's like, no, it was always a lie, right? Because our customers don't know what they want. They don't know what they need. They've got no idea what we can do, and they don't have the vocab to ask for it anyway. So we're sort of over-optimising. It's around optimising that IT organisation, right? It's optimising around tickets and delivery, not on value to the business.
So say one of our listeners or someone in the established business community has a problem, but then they don't know if they can get solved, and they want to get something, a bit of software developed, for example.
Yep.
What would be the advice you would give them around to go and find a software development house or a person who will develop something for you? What process would you take if you were in a business?
Yeah. So the gold standard for that is to have someone do it internally, right? And you'll hear a lot of people get up and say, hey, don't even come to me if you don't have a CTO in your business. So this is more startup stuff. But if we're going to build this thing, just make sure you've got someone technical to do it with. So, and the way that degrades is people will go out and get a technical person and put them in a headlock, right? And say, here's my technical person, right? And then try and lock them into that business. But the practicality of it is that you normally can't find someone like that, because if you think about it from it's not just someone come in and build software for me and then disappear, right? So you're actually starting something that's probably going to be important for you, or hopefully important for you. You need to be able to maintain it and change it and update it and support it, right? So you're starting a sort of a relationship here. So outsourcing it just to get something built for you is the way a lot of the software outsourcing sort of degrades, because they just want the product. They think it's the software they want. But you also want the software built, and then you also want the source code for it, and you want the capability to build it and improve it. And if you're talking about mobile apps, you also want the keys to be able to deploy the thing.
So your advice would actually be to hire a CTO or someone technically internally, and then software developers? Yeah,
I would not hire a CTO internally, right? And that's more around the motivations of people. I'd hire someone who's a senior dev or a head of engineering, even head of engineering is probably a bit higher, and say, right, so we're going to build in this space. Part of what we're building is if we get this right, then there'll be a role there, right? So we'll grow you into head of engineering, or we'll grow you into CTO if you want. But when I'm working with some of the startups, and some of the other businesses as well, just designating someone as CTO, they come in thinking they're much higher than they are, right? When really, and when you need to pull them back, then hang on, I'm a CTO, right? So it actually ends up hurting those people a little bit more than it helps them, right? But I'd recommend getting someone in who's into the space, understands how to deliver a 3 out of 10, right, product, which is really weird to ask someone to do, especially when their default is, I can do a 4 out of 10. It's like, no, that's wasting money and effort, right? We don't know if we need 4 out of 10 yet. Just deliver a 3 out of 10. So on time, on budget, at 3 out of 10. It's a weird skill. And I find it really difficult myself because I'm engineer, so I'm
you might actually get something done, right? It's better to have something than nothing.
Yeah, that's right, especially because we're doing it to work out whether it's the right thing to build.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not asking you to build something that's gold-plated. I'm asking you to help me drop this in front of our customers and work out whether they want a proper version of this.
So to that end, just devil's advocate, there's arguments around offshoring for POC or to build that 2 out of 3 because you're going to pay perceived 2 out of 3 probably. Any thoughts on that, or you're still...
So as long as it's...
as long as you have those things like you mentioned, like the source code, the keys.
And you're trying to get the capability to build it, right? So the reason that I'm not a massive fan of outsourcing of stuff, and like we were talking about before, outsourcing stuff that you compete on, right, is that you want to have that capability internally to do that again, right? So it's really about capability transfer for me, because the software, if it's a 3 out of 10, is throwaway anyway, right? So it doesn't really matter how it's got built.
But you've got the experience.
And you know how to deliver, right? So you can take something through to deployment and use, right? The way a lot of people will attack the software development as well, let's do the login first and let's do this and this and this. When can we use it? Oh, when we finished everything. But you said you're doing this in an agile manner. We're delivering it incrementally. It's like, no. It's got to be usable as a product first for us to be able to get the feedback from the customers we're talking to. Right. So, and that's where you'll hear the term MVP in startups. So minimal viable product or minimum viable product.
Yeah, so and I would almost call that POC, but MVP.
So you're against offshoring software development, or
not offshoring? It's outsourcing. So
outsourcing. So and offshoring, unless you're over there, is outsourcing. Yeah. But it's more around not. So that there's some practicality to it, right? If you can't find someone to hire to do it, and you can't find someone, with the offshoring stuff, but if you can't find someone to hire to do it, nobody in your organisation can do it, and you can't do it, right? Your alternative is not do it or get someone else to do it.
Yeah, and I guess if I speak from, someone's got to own it internally, and you would like that person to own it internally to have some capability in the subject. I mean, I think, You can make I see the point you're trying to make, and I guess it's not black and white per se, but definitely somebody internally in the company has to understand it, has to we've seen working with some customers that they'll hire us and then they'll just go, just make it happen. I'm like, that's not how it works.
Make work,
right? Like you've got to engage as well. You can't just snap your fingers and it's all just going to happen. So as long as I found as long as there's somebody who truly owns it internally, is working with that, offshore or outsource. I mean, outsource is just a bigger catch-all for. They're just not in your company. They can be local or not. If you get those people that really buying in, really managing it, understanding it, then you'll have a higher probability of success.
So as long as it's not the contract managers, right? So they own the relationship. So they have actually got to be in there and doing it. So the way that
on the team.
Yeah. And their goal is to understand it and have the capability. That's sort of the hurdle that I use is, well, we should be building that skills internally. So long term, we don't need them. Right. Which is part of the way that outsourcing, especially around software development, is really tricky because most organisations
have zero capability.
Well, they have zero capability, but they're also not interested in building any capability.
Yeah.
And then when they work out that they don't have enough money to keep that software agency engaged anymore, interested anymore, then it's like, where are we? It all
goes down the toilet.
Yeah, that's right. That's where it's sort of naturally structured to go that way. So the way I normally get, especially startups, but it works for businesses that don't really have that function but want to build their own software as well, is outsourcing that software development is probably necessary, right? Because they can't get the person or they can't afford the person that they'd like to have. But have a junior in there who receives the software, receives the source code, is first point of call when something goes wrong, right? And their job is literally to understand as much of it as they can.
Yep.
Right. And then over time they start to work out. So you want the software, you want the ability to build it, and then the keys and all that sort of stuff, right? So they can do a spelling mistake change at some point, right? So you build up that capability internally, and then they can actually execute on it. Because in the context of the startup or the scale-ups that I'm normally talking to, the value of the business is normally dictated by their ability to do it.
Yep.
It's like, oh yeah, we can do this, but who builds your software? Oh, we got this Ukrainian one and these ones out of the Philippines and all that sort of stuff. Okay, the value probably isn't in your business then. Yep. The value lives outside of it.
Yep.
Oh, but we're great at contract management. Well, yeah, okay, cool, but that's not worth the multiples that we're going to be talking about here. So there's stuff that needs to be done around that. But normally I say find a bright young thing, right? Actually, the best thing to do would be finding 3 bright young things, right? Because then there's always 2 against 1, right? The dynamics work really well. But you find that, you find them, and they receive it. And their job is not to be able to build it, it's to understand it and then grow into being able to do those things, right? And so what you're looking for in those people then isn't an apex beast like software developer like me who's been doing it for 30 years, right? Who argues with enterprise architects and solution architects and all that sort of stuff, right? It's someone who genuinely loves what you're working on and has the capability and the inclination to jump in and do it, whatever needs to happen.
Yeah,
it's written in this language.
Gets the vision.
Yeah, and it's aligned, right?
Yeah. Where would you find like 3 people like that?
So I've got a real bias around this. So I like speaking to people that you know, right? So I like word of mouth. I like referrals, right? I really don't like going through recruiters. I really don't like that dynamic. But practicality, especially early on, because they got to pass the beer test or the fishing test, right? So would I go fishing with this person, or would I go to the pub with this person, right? So you're trying to build up that sort of a culture there. And because if you're thinking about it in terms of, like I said, it's a long-term relationship. It's not just come in and do this thing and get out, because that's where you get your mercenaries from. And as someone who does mercenary work every now and again, that's, I don't really care when I'm in there. I'm in there to do a job, and that thing's not in my scope, and it's not worth it for me to push outside that scope. So I'll just execute it and I'll go to the next contract, right?
I'd say, to be honest with you, someone who owns an established business, maybe like 50 staff or whatever, and they have a problem they want to solve, for them to actually find 3 bright young software developers
I'd go for
not in your community would be very, very hard to do.
Yeah.
Well, they've got some hot tips in this podcast. Just reach out to Peter.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. Why not? So, I mean, next week I'm presenting at Code Networking at QUT, which is their sort of student software development organisation. for a presentation I've been doing for the last 8 years, which is the 6 key things of software development.
So what's that look like over the last 8 years, the growth in that area? Like the amount of students coming through?
Oh, yeah, it's sort of unending, right? There's just constantly people coming through. I mean, it ebbs and flows, right, around how many people there are that are interested in that space.
Okay.
Right. So at the moment, I imagine we're about to go down a bit because of the all the startups having problems. So there's a lot of layoffs happening, all that sort of stuff. But for me, the software development stuff is a value creation center of the universe at sometimes, right? Because you can sit there with a laptop and have an idea and build a thing, right? And if it's an Apple one, you can pay Apple $100 and then you're allowed to access 3 billion people on their marketplace, right? And they'll charge you 30% of your revenue that you do through it, right? So you can sit there and literally come up with something, right? So there's a very creative aspect to it. I'd like to see some more entrepreneurship with it, which is where we spend a bit of time in the university, or I spend a bit of time in the universities around, trying to get them to understand that they can build their own thing. So it's not about getting a job at Canva or Atlassian. It's about building your own Canva or Atlassian, right? So I think there's enough coming through to make that happen. Without starting fights with the universities, they're teaching them things that there's things that we can teach them, right? Which is what this presentation's about. It's a 2-hour rant, right? And I've got to swear because I've got to get the kids' attention, right? So if they did those things, and they're really simple, they're source code control and formal releases and automated builds and developer tests and continuous integration and collaboration tools, right? If they learn those things, then they're useful straight away. Right? I don't really care whether they know I care if they know what a for loop is, right? But I don't really care what language it is. I don't really care how well they work, because it's very hard to screw things up if you're operating in that environment. But if they don't know that, I've got to teach them that, and then they're productive, right? So it's very much a master builder sort of thing. So it's pragmatic, measure twice, cut once stuff. Right? Mm-hmm. So we go through and get them that, and then they're valuable out there. And the next thing is just getting them to understand that building that 10 out of 10 product isn't really what's required, right? Especially if it's internal facing. If it's internal facing, 3 out of 10 is probably going to be fine forever, right? Because you can be trained to not press a button that doesn't work.
Well, and and some of these, like you're right, like it's creative, right? So there is no right or wrong. There is no 10 out of 10, really.
Yeah, well, it moves.
Yeah,
right. So
it's subjective.
Yeah, and it moves over time, right? Because the value of say product and the value of say where people can spend their money depends on where else they can spend their money or what other products they can get, right? So it's not an absolute measure; it's a relative measure.
Yeah.
So the name of the game is to be able to control the cost of change, right? So because we have to adapt, we have to do it. So part of that is not over-investing, and part of that is also accepting that we might have built the wrong thing.
Can you define that? Define exactly what a 3 out of 10 is in your words?
10 out of 10 divided by 10 multiplied by 3, right? But yeah. So it's a deliberately low quality thing, right? Because what you're doing there is you're trying to build this really small prototype to elicit from your users about whether this is the right thing to build. So one way to think about it is if you think about a process that you need to execute, so a business process, right? And there's all these cases and all these corner cases that you'd need to cover to be able to say it's 100% complete, right? But the majority of that business process would probably be a really simple use case where everything goes right and nobody asks for support and it just works, right? So if you can make the assumption that we're happy with, say, 80% of our work being supported by the process and the other 20% we'll just handle manually, right? You can deliver a 3 out of 10 from an entire process point of view, right? But it's still hitting 80% of your use cases.
So that's a 3 out of 10?
Well, it starts out as a real steel thread. It's the smallest thing it possibly can be.
When you were saying it, and we're in that kind of MVP prototype stage and we're trying to get rapid feedback, to me, it's just got to be enough for the end user to get it and go, I can see this.
So it sort of evolves over time. So it's very iterative, right? So it's like the agile stuff. It's very iterative, and where you start out is actually a decent pitch. It's like, hey, if I built this thing, I'm thinking about building this thing. Is that valuable to you? Right? Yes, cool. MVP 1 done. Iterate. Right? So it sort of evolves over time. Where it starts to really hit the traction is to get that so you can actually execute a transaction through it. So you can do a thing, right? And there might be all these special cases that you can't do. So as long as if it's a procedure, as long as they're all from Australia, they've all got a tax number, they're all doing these things, right? They type in everything perfectly, and they haven't got any problems with it, then we can execute that.
Yeah, you've done the one thing, and then the user can envision all the other things that you said that you're promising you'll be able to do if it's a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
And are those things valuable to your user now that you can see them? We've kind of painted the picture.
Yeah.
And if you go, yeah, that's cool, and all right, cool, then we'll keep going this way.
And when I'm talking to product teams, I don't say 3 out of 10. I say 7 out of 10 because you don't want to scare everybody. But one of the ones that I normally talk about a lot is expectation management around this.
Yeah.
If you deliver a 7 out of 10 and you told someone it was a 7 out of 10, they're really happy with that. They're stoked with that. They're fine with it. If you tell them it was a 5 out of 10 and deliver a 7 out of 10, they're kind of, yeah, okay, that was fine. But Peter, I could have had the 5 2 weeks early. I was happy with the 5. You didn't give me the 5. You gave me a 7. That's great. So it's under promise, over deliver. That's great. But I was happy with the 5. Could you have delivered it earlier, or don't over invest in it?
Well, that's interesting. Right? Huh? Yeah, okay.
But if you tell them it's 10, right, and deliver them a 7, then they're ringing up, they're complaining, they're threatening to leave, they're going to sue.
Yeah, real bad.
Now, the interesting thing in this is that in all 3 of those cases, very different reactions from your customer. Same quality software delivered, 7 out of 10, or same quality product delivered, 7 out of 10. So the expectation management is actually what controls that reaction. So instead of delivering stuff to people, instead of promising 10 and delivering 7, when someone who's a 10 wants a 10 out of 10, you've only got a 7, just say it's not ready for you yet. We'll deliver to you later, right?
Such a fundamental life skill.
Yeah, it is.
Expectation management. I mean, communication, managing the expectations, just tell people. Oh, it's going to be a day late, or it's going to be a day early.
Yeah. Just don't tell them on the day, right?
Yeah, tell them before. Then you're fine.
Well, that's right. The phone call of, hey, listen, we're looking ahead. In 2 weeks, we might be a couple of days late. Yeah, mate, no problems at all.
Exactly.
Right? Absolutely no problems at all. What happened? Yeah.
Morning of, different story.
Yeah. The morning of is when you,
Such a fundamental skill. Anyway.
So Peter, I wasn't going to go here actually, mate, but ChatGPT.
Yep.
A lot of hype around it now, and a lot of businesses are talking about it.
Yeah.
Saving me time.
Yeah, saving Brad time. We're looking around the podcast how we can help automate some words, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on how that's going to affect businesses? And I guess that and the evolution of AI.
Yeah, I mean it's a deep topic, right? So it's progressing very quickly, but the dynamic that happening is nothing new from a technology point of view. So
what was that? Sorry, what is it?
The dynamic that's happening.
Oh yeah, right.
Isn't that different? So I'm on a panel coming up around education. So what do teachers do with this stuff, which is really interesting. But if the industry that you're working in measures the quality of what you do by how hefty the report is, so how many pages it is, and you are competing on the ability to write Knight's big document, you're in trouble, right? So the way that we measure whether something's great or not is whether they've spent the time writing about it. That's not going to be a valid measure of whether it's good thinking anymore, or whether it's well thought out, or whether it's well done. Whereas previously we'd use that as an indicator.
Yeah.
So the value of it will change, right? So, and it's interesting. I was working with a startup in this sort of space as well, and they were saying, we can generate all of this text for you in the tone of the voice of your company, so we can train it on the way that you guys write. So it's not just how ChatGPT writes, it's how you write. It's like, okay, that's really good value. And it's like, okay, so we can do as big as you want. It's like, okay, cool, but how are you doing that? Well, we're putting a prompt in. Okay, so as someone who's reading these documents, I'd rather read the prompt.
Sorry, they're putting a prompt in.
The prompt into ChatGPT. So they're saying, here's the thing I want you to talk about in this tone.
Yep.
I'd rather read the prompt than the 300-page document that the prompt generates.
Right? So I've... interesting, like I've started playing with it really probably more so in the last month. And so a problem that I was trying to solve, we were talking about earlier, was the amount of work that's involved in producing this podcast.
Yep.
And then we cut it up into the individual episodes, and, I was doing all that work. But there's a lot of work just, scheduling, doing the transcripts, doing the editing, doing the summary, doing the artwork, posting it on LinkedIn, posting it on the website, and then you've got to write summary text, and you've got to do these other things. But now I guess this is AI, but the way that automatic transcription has gotten a lot better, especially if you give it a nice clean signal. So we'll take that text. Okay, so now I've got a text-based version of this podcast. I need a quick summary. Bang. So I'll bang that into ChatGPT. I need hashtags. Okay, give me some hashtags. Cool. So that's for the main episode, but then we cut it up. So I've got an editor. I won't publish anything until I've checked it, and I generally write the summary, but, she'll do the cuts. So we can end up out of this episode, well, this one we'll probably get a few more. We might get 10 to 20 little cuts and little snippets, but each one of those needs to be summarized. So that can take, then it needs to be posted, then it needs the hashtags, then you need all that stuff. So that can take up to 30 minutes per snip. So 20 times 30, I'm looking at 10 hours on top of my already extremely full week. So now I've worked out I can just take that text file, the transcription, upload it, and I've kind of worked out how I need to ask ChatGPT to summarize it to get to, like, it's not perfect, but like we were saying, it's a 7 out of 10. It's a 5 out of 10. It's better to keep moving and get something out than to go, oh, it's not perfect. I'm going to spend 2 hours and just, keep.
Especially because you can update the spelling mistakes and everything like that, so it doesn't really matter.
It's more. It's probably more
if it needs to change, if it changes up, if you need to change it, my point is that you put it out there, and if you need to change it, you can just change it.
Yeah, we can change it. Like I'll still review it, but I can get a lot done really quickly. So it's a simple use case, but I'm quite impressed that I can give it a transcript file, and the transcript file will have timestamps and a lot of other, like, noise text, if you like. It's not just a straight paragraph, but it can obviously recognize it. Like, I tell it this is a .srt file, write it in the second person. Like, I've worked out what to ask it to get, like, a decent just paragraph summary of what it is. And then once it's done, I'm like, okay, cool, give me the suggested hashtags I should use. It'll do the hashtags. And then, I've effectively now just saved myself, well, say would take me 10 hours. Probably now it's like an hour for me to prompt. Instead of taking 10, it'll probably take me an hour. So I was like, that's actually really cool. And I am quite impressed with how it can interpret what I would consider like a lot of noise text and then spit out something meaningful. So
for me, it's absolutely magic. And sort of my point is that previously in market, we look at a high quality produced podcast or vodcast or whatever it is that had the SRTs done and nicely separated and had everything. And so that must be good because they've spent 10 hours on it, so it must have been worth spending 10 hours on it. So now the bar's moved down, so if someone can spend an hour on it and get the same quality, it's no longer a good indicator of whether it's a good podcast anymore. So we're going to be flooded with content, right? We're going to need a different way to measure whether it's high quality or not. Right? So for me, that's the dynamic that I see.
Yeah, because it will over time, so it's not going to be, it's not immediate, but over time it will renormalize or reset that benchmark. Again, it goes back to your entrepreneurial piece though, right? Like people have to have the foresight and the intuition to actually like apply it and try it and think of how to use it as a solution, which comes back to that entrepreneurial.
Yeah, an understanding of how the industry sits because that used to be hard. And it's no longer hard, so the whole industry moves now, right? So where's the right place to be if everything moves?
Are you seeing anyone using ChatGPT to get code written?
Yeah. I saw it as I saw someone talk about it as a stochastic parrot, right? So it just basically randomly puts out what anybody else would put out if you just kick it off in that direction. The other one is that it's basically a big predictive text. Right. So the thing is that it's trained off the data that's had in there. So it depends on where you sit philosophically in this, right? But this could be another. We'll bring in some other people as well. We can do this properly, right? But it's what it's doing is it's modeling the way that people actually what word do they? What's kind of not word, but let's say it's a word. What word do people normally say next after this one? Right. And so the way it actually works is it's like half of a translator. So the original paper actually talks about taking, say, French and translating it to English. And it says, there's the French sentence, now translate it to English. And it looks at it and says, here's what it should say. So the way GPT works underneath it is roughly let's give it that prompt and just let it hallucinate afterwards, just tell it to keep going, right? And that's what it does, right? It just keeps talking. So it's really interesting, but it's very much, it's saying this is what people would normally say after this word, right? Now, without getting too philosophical about it, I mean, okay, that's how that works. Is it how humans work? Geez, it'd be disappointing if that's all we are, right? But it could be.
I think it can get, as I said before, don't expect a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But I think, if you just need to get that 3 or 5 out of 10, you can get it pretty quickly. And then it probably redefines what a 10 out of 10 is or things like that. So nothing it's done is like, whoa, this is amazing. But I'm like, shit, thanks. You've just saved me a bit of time. I got my 5 out of 10. I can move on to the next thing.
I mean, it's pretty amazing to sit there and watch it. It's basically magic. So's the audio to text transformation. Right.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, and so
that has gotten so much better.
And then the mid-journey stuff, right? So the image generation stuff. Draw from text. Draw me a picture of this doing this thing.
Actually, I haven't tried that.
I've tried that. It's a bit hit and miss, to be honest.
I've just seen all the social media people on YouTube like going at it, like check this out, and they'll have like 3 eyes or because it will do a little bit of a hit and miss.
Yeah, but I mean they're basically typing in text and they're generating these high quality HD images out of it. It's like incredible. And the next one that's coming is the video.
Yep. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just absolutely incredible. But now it's a creativity tool.
Yep.
So it's an interesting thing to think about. But again, for me, it's a little bit like say books. Right. It used to be that if you're going to do a book, right, you'd have to convince a publishing house to do it. You'd have to have all these editors go through it because producing a book's really expensive. Right. So it's going to be a high quality book. It's going to be well thought out. It's going to be edited properly. It's going to be typeset properly. Right, because we're going to do it. Suddenly, when we get to the point where everybody can do a book, it's no longer a good measure of it must be good thinking because it's in a book. It's a book and it doesn't mean anything anymore.
It's kind of the same thing happened in music, right? Like the democratization, if you like, of the music industry when we went from effectively analog to digital and used to have $1 million studio to produce any song that, with this laptop you could produce a multi-platinum.
Well, especially with the microphone, right?
Mm. So
just quickly, there's a company, a startup over in, so they're based in top of Fortitude Valley, so Mawson Ventures, but I think Popgun. Popgun's where they came through, and now it's called Splash, right? Popgun, they actually did an AI that will accompany you. So you start playing something on the piano, and it will play something with you. Right, and then they actually got it to the point where it'll sing with you as well. So you could type in the lyrics and it'd sing.
That's pretty cool. Like the digital, because you've seen some of my history out there, and that's why we do this. Because I was never very good at it, which is again why I'm sitting here. But I'm always fascinated by that's the digital signal processing and all that is a whole other area of tech that sits out of the side. But when you apply AI, it can look at any of those things. Yeah. And it is quite fascinating what you can do. And just some of the tools in music production now that I see just from 10 years ago.
It's incredible.
It's quite fascinating.
So you hear like 2 pitches a week, or something like that. Probably more actually.
Yeah. I had 2 today. So
yeah, well there you go. Are you getting an increased rate of entrepreneurs coming through with ideas that involve like AI and ChatGPT and how they can like leverage that? Like, is it creating a lot of, I guess, new opportunities?
It is. There's part of the thing that I get dropped into because I've got that technical background, right? It's okay, we're doing this thing and we're AI. It's okay, cool, what sort, right? And they say, oh, this, okay, well, what sort, right? And 4 or 5 levels deep, and then we find out whether they're doing it or not. Right? 2 things happen. It turns out either someone else is doing it for them, so it's through an API or something like that, or they're really using Excel and they just wanted to drop some AI on it because they think it make it sound sexy.
But don't you use AI? Like, don't you want to have like a real problem? And like you're saying before, right? So someone come with there's a problem in the world I want to solve, and you go like, okay, well, how can we solve this? And if technology is the way to do it, and the ones that come to you, then we'll use it, and AI forms part of that stack to use it.
So it depends how people are coming at it. So we're talking about the business one before. So hey, this is what we need to do. We use AI to do it. Okay, cool, right? But then you've got people coming out of technology as well, saying I just want to use AI on something,
right?
Or I just want to use blockchain on something. Right, so let's find the thing to do it with. So there's a little bit of technology first sometimes, there's business first sometimes. So, and a lot of the times I'm working with people that are technology first.
And would that be a case sometimes of joining 2 different pitches together?
Well, yeah. Well, actually, a lot of the time it's, so you get a business person say, we're an AI and blockchain company, right? We're doing this thing. It's like, no, can you please just pitch it? You're doing this thing. And the way that we're doing it so efficiently is because we're using AI and blockchain. Right, then it's actually a business pitch. Otherwise, it's a technology demo. Look at the cool thing we're doing with this hammer, right? So it's a little bit about framing it, which is where I spend a bit of time as well. So around the pitch coaching stuff and getting people to do it, which again relies on that technical background as well. It's like, okay, cool. I know what you're doing. Can you please present it this way? Because then they'll understand the value of it. So a bit of translating. Which ties into the hard, valuable problem thing, right? So there's another business recently, Freethen, that came through that's doing sort of imports. They've actually had a good last week, right? So they're doing imports, and they're working with out of China, and they've actually got integration with the Chinese blockchain court, right? So when someone screws something up, they can just go straight back and say, "No, you're done," And that doesn't just stop them selling to Robbo here in Brisbane, but it also stops them selling anywhere.
Wait, blockchain court?
Yeah, so I don't really know a lot about it, but they're trying to get that trade being much more efficient. And so part of that is getting the ability to do conflict resolution much more efficiently as well. So this, you should really have a chat to them, but they're registering what's coming through on the blockchain, right? So when there's a dispute, then we know exactly what happened, we know who touched it and what happened.
Blockchain, when you say it's on the blockchain, you mean because it's on some kind of, blockchain technology where it's across multiple different areas, and if you change one, it changes all, that kind of thing?
It's on a ledger, so a ledger that can't be rewritten, or can be rewritten, but not with compute, So practically can't be rewritten. So then it becomes this thing that everybody agrees to as it's happening, and if it goes to crap, then we can look back at what happened. One of the ways I talk about blockchain is it's my favourite log format. Right?
So renewable energy.
Yep.
Oh God, we're going.
Well, no, like this.
Well, it's one of the business I spoke to this morning.
Well, because we used to dabble in software a little while ago, and yada yada yada. And anyway, I can't remember how I met this guy, and he was in River City Labs, but he was working out of the camp. What's the one in?
It used to be called the Capital. Yeah.
Brisbane City Council has a.
Yeah, so Brisbane Business Hub.
It's like in the Queen Street Mall.
Yeah, it used to be called the Capital.
Okay.
And now it's called Brisbane Business Hub.
Yeah, that one. Look, anyway, it's a renewable energy. It's a complicated thing, right? The energy market's a complicated thing. But to me, I love solar, love tech, love just seeing my apps, love batteries, love the fact that I've got like a solar power plant on my house. And you got this situation, right? Like the sun is shining during the day. Yep. We need to store it. And there's an economic factor as well. And I don't understand why this isn't solved. And you have all these various hardware companies, and they're all going to have their kind of API. But ultimately, I just want to pay cheap during the day, charge my battery, and release it at night. So do you see people working on that?
Yeah, literally the guys I was talking to this morning is a company called Alexis.
Okay.
And they're doing basically exactly that. And so...
Did you like their pitch?
I know these guys for a while. They're really good. So distributed generation needs to happen, in my opinion. Now this gets me into big fights with Dad, but because Dad used to be general manager network for Energex. Right?
Okay, all right.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff around this, but basically the legislation is a big problem, right? And then also there's some engineering stuff, which is returning that much energy to the grid causes problems. Right?
Yeah, I heard they literally just changed the rules that if you've got more than 10 kVA Energex, kind of like what they did in South Australia, where Energex, you must have something installed that allows Energex to basically turn off your solar.
Yeah. To be honest, they've been doing that for a while with a thing called a Zellweger system with your hot water systems.
Okay.
Right, so they'll be able to turn your hot water on and off, but that's a little bit less focusing than your power going off. But
well, I'm just literally at home, and I'm there's Amber. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
So they've tried to do something cool where they're like, okay, we'll give you wholesale prices. So, theoretically, when there's lots of renewables in the grid, it should be cheaper. And they'll give you like the Amber traffic light system. So if it's green, go for it, and it will tell you the price, and it kind of tries to forecast it. But really also, like, I want my inverter battery to get those signals, because I'm here like on my phone, like, all right, got to charge battery now. Like it's just ridiculous. But you're trying to, one, do the right thing, but two, save money. Like whenever there's an economic, if you can make this renewable thing money in the pocket for people, that's a big driver. So I don't understand. It's annoying me that there's not a solution for this where it can automate. Just if power is cheap on the grid, charge my battery, right? Like so I'm sure I know there's a lot of politics, and there's Energex, and there's the network, and there's a lot of parties involved that definitely adds complication. But to me, it should be like, here's a signal from the grid, charge.
Yeah. And there's also companies talking about using EVs, so electronic.
Oh, as a
battery transfer. So instead of using the network at all, so charge over here and then take it home and run your house off the car battery overnight.
Yeah.
Right?
So we're 2 electric cars. I'm about to add a bunch more batteries because I kind of have to do it. It's just not a cost-effective way to do this.
It makes you feel like a prepper as well, right?
Well, I am prepping. I just need my aircon to run. So getting 3-phase aircon. I've got rainwater, and I'm like, mate, I just need to be. If the world ends and I can run my aircon, I can stay out here forever.
Yeah,
as long as I can.
True. Food, not so much.
You'd be surprised how hard it is to achieve this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because one of the interesting things is, and this is where the Alexa stuff we're talking about this morning is the distributed generation stuff is the way it should work. because we don't really need to have it centralized and then transmitted.
So distributor generation or distributed?
Distributed generation.
Yeah, right,
so
which is effectively
what you're doing.
solar.
Right? Yeah, well, it can be solar, or it can be wind, or it can be...
As opposed, we've got generation all over the place instead of a coal plant.
The thing I like about it, these guys, is that you can do that. That's an individual decision, right? And then you can also return your energy to the grid, right? Which is the stuff that they're working on, because they're the guys that actually help set up the grid, so they know what's going on when it was built. Right.
So these are guys, this is a different kind of startup that have been working in the industry for ages.
Well, no, this is Alexis. So the guys used to be Energex, Ergon, or Energex.
So they're not the 19-year-olds, these are seasoned veterans.
These guys, the CEO there up until recently was 72.
Oh, okay.
70, right?
And this is a hard problem.
A very hard problem. And but they're also very smart, and they know what they need, and they know how the industry works, and they know why the industry is set up that way, so they can just jump in and build this stuff, right? But the problems they're running into isn't so much the engineering problem or the legal problem. It's the fact that, say, Energy Queensland for the last years have planned this certain way, and they've got all this infrastructure out there that will make this money back this way, and this will destroy that. There's a whole bunch of really weird incentives, But I love the fact that as an individual you could do that, and you could oversupply from whatever you needed, right? So you can build it to the maximum number of solar cells you could buy and return it to the grid. And if you can do that on the low voltage circuit, you can actually sell that to people that are inside your low voltage circuit.
Voltage circuit.
So
I'll have to look it up after.
So the generation, so they create a transmission, which is power link, right? And then it goes to the distribution.
Yep.
Distributions now
10,000.
Yeah. Well, 110 kV down to
10, isn't it?
I think it's 11. And then 11 to the 415, which is what goes down your three wires.
Three-phase.
Yeah, so the three-phase down there.
Yeah.
So the low voltage circuit is the low voltage three-phase stuff.
Yep.
So normally, I can't remember how many, couple of hundred houses on that, each one. So you could share energy between it.
Yep.
And then once you get 6 of them, then you can start to do some really cool things on that low voltage circuit.
It's creating like a little...
virtual power plant.
Amongst a community.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the lovely economics part of it, is I love that they can be doing that, and then an individual will buy it, then more individuals will buy it, and it makes economic sense for them individually. And then once they get to a certain level, then they get
So
better.
what is their product?
It's like
software or
no,
hardware?
it's a hardware. So it's basically it looks like 2 racks.
So you'd already have solar, and then you'd add this technology.
Yeah. So I think you can think of it as the inverter. So it sits in between. It's basically the meter.
Okay.
So and lets you produce more to the grid back, and then also take stuff in from the grid if you need to.
Is this out in the market already?
Yeah, it's more not really resi. It's probably they've got doing a pilot program now with IKEA. Was the last one that I saw. Because if the nice thing, it's interesting at residential, right? So you can buy as much as you want. But if you're saying that, say, a company like Woolworths or IKEA, right? They can afford to buy as many solar cells as they can. They've got a big roof up there, and they can buy the batteries, right? So now your cost center that used to be power can be a profit center.
It's like a SD-WAN for solar
energy
powered, renewable powered wide area
trick is
network.
finding the legislation for that, right? Now, if you think about that. If you think about that in terms of, so Australia needs another coal-fired power plant or something like that, right? Or Southeast Asia does, right? So instead of building a new coal-fired power plant, everybody individually can build their own stuff and be standalone, much more robust, right? That's an interesting sort of trade-off there. So instead of a couple of $1 billion to build that, well, we could do this where everybody pays for their own. Yeah. That's the distributed generation stuff, right?
So is it retrofittable?
It depends on who you're talking to. So again, we're well outside of my area of practical expertise, but I know enough to be able to talk about it. Yeah. So I'm expecting a whole bunch of...
Solid pitch, was it?
Yeah.
Was it a solid pitch today?
I know these guys really well. So,
maybe we can get them in to pitch to Brad. I think he's keen.
Yeah. Oh, it's I don't know, whatever. It's one of those things I'm just interested in. I enjoy it, and
it makes sense.
I'm well invested into it.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? I want air conditioning when it's hot. When it's hot, there's generally solar energy there. I'm going to use it, right? So it's this beautiful engineering fit. Not everything fits that well.
Yeah,
right?
but it's really hard, at least from the conversation I have, to get 3-phase battery backup off grid. They call it 3-phase synchronous backup.
It depends if you want to connect it to the grid or not. if you're doing it
totally off grid,
different, should be. Yeah,
I'm almost there.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, Peter. You've shared some awesome insights, and we rambled on a little bit in the end there.
I warned you.
This is the longest one we've done.
Yeah,
it's almost an hour and a half. Should we just go for another 8 minutes? Yeah,
we'll just ask politics next. No.
But let's bring it back to the stuff that you wanted to talk about, because we will cut that. Right?
Yeah, we can cut that out. But mate, Peter, really appreciate you coming in. You shared a lot of good valuable insights from the running successful startups and your software development background and what you would do in that kind of approach. If someone listening has a problem they want to get your feedback on or want to engage someone in the startup community, how can they reach you?
So LinkedIn's normally pretty good. Email's better. So and then also on Twitter. So the internet hate machine that is Twitter at the moment.
Twitter.
Right? Yeah. So that's normally where I'm there, as much as I'd prefer to be other things, but that works. But if they reach out, I'm normally happy to have a chat. First chat with everybody is normally fun. Right? So you work it out. Second chat's where you work out whether you're worth anything. But the first one, especially if they tell us that it's through the podcast or through that they heard about it through this, so give me some context.
Yep.
Right. There's a lot of interesting people in the ecosystem. They're all trying to do really things, and there's really good things, and there's a big lack of hard, valuable problems. So if you're sitting on something that's hard and valuable and maybe doesn't make sense from a core business from you guys, but if it was solved, we definitely buy it. You can drop some money into that, and it can turn up. Right? And if it doesn't, then nobody cares. Right? It's fine. We took a shot. We did some stuff. It didn't turn out. Let's go again. Right? That's the sort of way we can do it. And I like that mechanism better. So even talking to some businesses about, instead of outsourcing an app development for like $200,000 or $300,000, which I've heard of, which is incredible for me. But anyway, how about you just set up a startup? You get 3 bright young things to build it, and give them $100,000. And if it's great, then buy it. And if it's not, then set them free, right? And if they keep going or they don't, right? And that's much more entrepreneurial way of running this thing than trying to work out how to engage the right people that will apply for a sort of job, because doing that as a startup brings entirely different people to play. Right?
So that's good advice, because some business to get one functional bit of software built can spend $500,000 sometimes getting that thing built. If they could do that as a startup and then fire it away for
or even do it as 3, right? 2 or 3 startups and race them. Right? There's a real opportunity there to do that stuff. And there's the interesting thing about that is that if you're a person coming out of university, you can go and get a job, right, where you get paid, which is low risk. It's great, it works. Or, hey, I can go and do this startup, learn a whole bunch of new things, and maybe be a business owner, get through that startup and get bought, get an acquisition and go again, right? So that brings a different sort of person to play, right, that you can't recruit into an organisation.
Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate you coming in.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thanks, mate. Good chat.
Yeah.